Hi, I'm Doris Epstein. Welcome to MENSCHlife TV. Coming up on today's show is a look at a unique, even revolutionary program about how to have a healthy heart. For decades, we've been told, don't eat fat, don't eat sugar, exercise, and we've been doing it. And yet the incidence of heart disease and heart attacks is steadily increasing. And later, a look at a life-changing experience for a group of 20 Israeli, Arab, and Jewish kids, teenagers, who have been brought to camp in Ottawa, a camp outside of Ottawa, to live together, work together, and listen together. But first, Dr. Elie Klein, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Doris.
You've been doing something for the last, how long, 10 years?
About 10 years now, yeah.
At specializing in how to have a healthy heart without drugs.
Yeah. So for the past 10 years, I've been helping people address risk factors related to heart disease naturally. So risk factors such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, help people...
all of which we take drugs for.
All of which we take drugs for. In fact, out of the 5 most commonly prescribed medications in Canada and in the States, I believe, the first 3 medications are for cholesterol and for blood pressure. Yeah. And so I've been helping individuals with these issues to address these issues naturally, to prevent heart attacks and strokes, and even individuals who had a cardiac event to help them prevent a recurring event and improve their both quality of life and hopefully life expectancy.
You give seminars, you give public seminars.
So yes.
Heart health.
Yeah, and I've launched my Healthy Heart program because there are a lot of misconceptions about what causes disease, what causes heart disease, and related chronic diseases, and there's a lot I can do in the clinic with a person one-on-one, but there's so much information out there, and I find that people are so they have to be retrained about how to think about food, about nutrition, about their body, about their health.
But don't we know more? We're more health conscious than we ever were in the history of mankind.
Well,
you can't go out to dinner socially without a discussion of what's good for you, what's bad for you.
That's true.
But you say that heart disease is increasing and heart attacks are on the rise.
Yes. So while the main agencies in Canada and the States, Heart and Stroke Foundation, etc., boast that has been a reduction in the incidence of death from heart disease, this is true. And much of it has to do with better emergency care, better response time, and so on and so forth. But the actual incidence of heart disease, the actual number of heart attacks that occur, have gone up steadily ever since heart disease have become an issue in the 1950s.
That's astounding, that fact.
Yeah, and it's...
And we're doing everything right that we believe is right.
Well, that's true. Well, it's as astounding, particularly in light of the fact that this is predominantly a preventable condition. And so is diabetes, so is arthritis, and all these other conditions
even when it runs
closely
in the
related.
family, even when you're predisposed to it because of genetics?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Genetics has a very small portion to do with it. You can control and manage your cardiovascular well-being with the correct dietary habits and lifestyle habits, for sure. But see, for the last 40 years, we've followed nutrition suggestions that are derived from, unfortunately, what I believe, what many other like-minded health practitioners and scientists believe has been poor science. Science that has served perhaps certain commercial interests, food industry and so on, and haven't really served the average person, you and I.
Can you be more specific? Give us some examples.
Sure. So, based on recommendations by public health agencies, right? Public health agencies, people have, for the last few decades, have lowered their fat consumption, saturated fat consumption.
It's a dirty word, saturated.
It's a dirty word, and it's an unfortunate, really unfortunate that people consider it to be a dirty word, and I'll get into it later on if you'd like to. So people have lowered their fat consumption, their cholesterol consumption, salt consumption, so on and so forth. And in fact, as I mentioned, the incidence of heart disease has been going up. So we've been doing all these things that we're supposed to do, the right things, and yet which is supposed to help prevent, because it's a preventable condition, and yet we don't have much to show for. Other, of course, with better emergency care, we can actually save people's lives when they first get their heart attack. But we aren't able to prevent the actual heart attack from occurring as well as we could. We could eliminate more than 80-85% of heart attack cases. Absolutely.
Well, what aren't we getting here?
Well, what we're not getting is, and I just want to touch on one more misconception, and then we'll get into what we're not getting here. Another misconception is that cholesterol is a culprit, right? Cholesterol is a culprit, and what I'm going to say now may sound outright heretic for a lot of people. That cholesterol is not the cause of blockages in the arteries. Okay, so in a recent study, and there were numerous studies of this kind, but a recent 2009 study was published in the American Heart Journal. Scientists, doctors have followed thousands of people who had a heart attack, and they found out that 75% of these individuals had normal cholesterol levels at the time of the heart attack.
Okay, we'll be back in just a minute. We have to take a break. More from Dr. Elie about heart and heart disease. How to have a healthy heart, Dr. Elie Klein. The last thing you said just jarred me. 85%, what was that figure? 75% that people that with heart attacks do not have elevated cholesterol.
That's correct.
But that is the boogie bear.
Right.
Today.
Yeah.
Be careful, don't eat this, don't eat that. Take drugs if you have a smidgen of it.
That's right. Well, most people understand cholesterol to be something that we get from our diet, right? The fact of the matter is that most of the cholesterol in the body is produced from within. Okay. Why would a substance that the body produces be harmful for the body? The body's innate intelligence wouldn't allow that to happen. Okay, so cholesterol is something the body produces for a reason. Okay, it needs cholesterol. Most of our corticosteroid hormones, steroid hormones, are made from cholesterol. Okay, cholesterol is an important integral part of every single membrane that surrounds and protects every single cell in our body. Cholesterol is required to assist with fat digestion. Okay, so cholesterol is absolutely required for well-being. All right.
Can we have too much though? And does that hurt our heart?
Okay, so my view is that no. Studies show, there are other studies show that people with too low cholesterol levels, particularly the elderly, are just as likely to die from heart disease, and more so will have elevated all-cause mortality. They die prematurely from other conditions, because we're taking something very important, very vital for the body's health. Okay, so it's important to have an understanding of what truly causes heart disease. Okay.
What about fat? We're not allowed to eat fat. We're not allowed to eat to have a lot of salt, minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about fat?
Well, early on in the 20th century, when most people live in agricultural communities, they ate a lot of fat, butter, animal fat, and so on and so forth. In the U.S., they started tracking data on health and deaths since the early 1900s. Okay, and in the early 1900s, the incidence of heart disease was less than 9%, and even less because of occlusive heart disease. In other words, because of blockages in the arteries, heart attacks, and so on. Okay, fast forward 1950, people dropped all this butter and these animal fats that they've gotten from their farm animals, right?
No whole milk.
no whole
Skim
milk, skim milk, and all that. And they started eating a lot of what? A lot of margarine
Yes.
and hydrogenated oils. And by the 1950s, heart disease has basically reached its peak. Okay, so fat is important. Saturated fat constitutes 32% of our entire fat makeup.
And we need fat.
And we need fat, absolutely need fat. Again, every single membrane of our cells consists of fat. There's a lot of fat in our brain, which is very important. Fat protects our nervous system, and so on and so forth. So fat is really, really important for our well-being, and we're eating too little fat now. And there's some studies and some research that shows that limiting the consumption of saturated fat and consuming too many vegetable oils can actually increase the incidence of diseases such as diabetes, for example, hypothyroidism, for example.
That's shocking.
Yep.
These are real myth-busting things that you're saying here.
They are. Absolutely they are. And if someone, again, what I'm saying here may sound heretic to a lot of people.
It does.
We're so used to hearing certain things, right? So if you have trouble with, I'm not really comfortable eating more animal fat, maybe butter is something you could, but there are also other vegetable or vegetarian sources of fat that are very healthy, such as, for example, avocados, for example, right? Coconuts and coconut
But
oils.
it's okay to eat butter, and it's okay to drink whole milk.
Absolutely, it's okay to eat butter.
What about eggs?
Again, big misconception with eggs. We've been scared about eggs. Eggs are very healthy, very balanced in their nutrition.
So we should eat eggs.
Absolutely. Preferably organic eggs. They have a better oil ratio, essential oil ratio.
Why is that? Why do organic eggs? Why is that better
because ideally, when it's a true organic egg, when the chicken eats what it meant to eat, which isn't solely grains, but also other critters and things and so on, they produce a better essential oil ratio. Whereas chicken that is fed grains all the time produces a lot of the omega-6s. Now, we need some omega-6s, but too many omega-6s can be problematic.
What about salt?
Well, again, we need salt. Salt, NaCl, sodium chloride. We need both sodium for well-being. We need both chloride for well-being. Sodium is a very important agent that helps our cells absorb very essential nutrients. For example, glucose for sugar, for the production of energy, requires sodium for absorption into the cell. So a lot of misconceptions out there, and there are studies to support these misconceptions as well.
Water.
Extremely important.
But should we be drinking? How much should we be drinking?
Well, different theories about it, but
and is that important for heart health?
It is.
In what way?
Just drinking water alone for some people can have a significant effect on their blood pressure.
Water alone.
Water alone can have a significant impact on their blood pressure. Okay,
we have to break, but let's come back with Dr. Elie Klein and how to have a healthy heart and prevent heart attacks. Just a minute. The real culprits in heart disease. Tell us what they are.
Okay. So as people have started consuming less and less fat from the early 1900s, in addition to started eating too much processed vegetable oils, trans fatty acids, they also started eating more sugar, much more sugar. We consume a lot more sugar today than we have ever before. Okay. And there was a study, actually a scientific review of numerous studies on this topic, and was published in a mainstream medical journal, again in 2009, called the Archives of Internal Medicine. And what they found out was that the two primary culprits of heart disease, of plaque in the arteries, were sugar and trans fatty acids, as I mentioned before. Sugar and trans fatty acids. Okay, so that's what you need to avoid, basically, or at least limit. When you say sugar,
does that also include natural sugar, like in fruit?
Okay, so this issue is a big issue. It's a lot to
and
be said about it.
Kids live on apple juice.
That's right. That's right. So It includes all sugars, basically, okay? The big difference with sugar from fruit is that fruit also has vitamins and minerals that allow the body to process and utilize the sugar so that we can benefit from it and turn it into energy. Most of the sugar we get is from refined sources, refined starches, okay? And these are devoid of the vitamins and minerals the body requires to process the sugar, allow it to get into the cell and process it and extract energy from it. So what does it do? It lingers in the blood vessels, and there's a phenomenon called glycation, basically stickiness. It sticks to the arteries. By nature, it's sticky, so it sticks to the arteries. Now you've got a sticky surface on the arteries, and that's one of the main reasons for that results in that brings about production of plaque.
What about supplements? Vitamin supplements. How do you feel about that?
I think that they're beneficial. I use supplements when I help people, when I help clients. Diet is a foundation. Okay, it's best to get as much of your vitamins and minerals from your dietary sources. Okay, but when we're treating it with a condition, but we're not talking about merely prevention, then often we need to provide additional amount of vitamins and minerals. And so for that reason, supplements can be extremely beneficial at treating and reversing some of these conditions.
Actually reversing?
Actually reversing, absolutely.
What about something like diabetes, which is epidemic, type 2, adult onset diabetes? Have you treated successfully with food alone?
With food and supplements, absolutely, absolutely. Diabetes and heart disease are closely related, right? I just mentioned that. It's the sugar in the blood that brings about plaque in the arteries. And so heart disease is a primary complication of diabetes. And most cases of diabetes are basically adult onset diabetes, right? Adult onset diabetes that comes about because of poor dietary habits. Well, we've been taught wrong. And so just change that. Change that, and if a person can truly follow the right dietary habits, okay? And it's not that difficult. It may not be easy, but it's fairly simple, okay? And it doesn't mean that you need to starve yourself into health. Not at all, okay? You just need to change what you're eating, basically. And that can have a profound impact on the way the body handles sugar.
So that's your basic approach with chronic conditions as well as prevention.
Absolutely. Combination diet and supplements.
How about
herbs.
meat? Should we be eating meat? Should we be eating beef?
Well,
should we be vegetarian? How do you feel about that?
What are we talking about here? What context are we talking about here? Okay, if we're eating a little bit of meat in the context of a healthy diet, a diet that is rich in vegetables and some fruit and healthy nuts and seeds, okay, and water, right? Then a little bit of meat is great. That's a good source of protein. But when we don't have these vegetables, when we don't provide the body with nutrients required to process the raw material, our proteins, our carbohydrates, our fats, then we get into trouble.
So really you don't exclude anything.
I do tailor it to the individual when I treat people in the office. When I deliver my heart health educational program, then it's more of an educational program. It's not necessarily individually tailored, but people get a lot of good information they can use to then guide them in tailoring it to their individual needs.
You mentioned before that magnesium is underestimated in terms of significance in the human body.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of very important nutrients, okay? I feel that magnesium is one of these most important nutrients for cardiovascular well-being, for diabetes. Diabetics are chronically low in magnesium. People with blood pressure typically are chronically low in magnesium. It's an important mineral that is responsible for over 300 reactions in the body. And one example about magnesium, magnesium naturally acts to deactivate, that might sound a little complicated, okay? To deactivate an enzyme that is responsible for cholesterol production. It's the same enzyme that cholesterol-lowering medications block. So it works in a similar way. only without the side effects. So people with low levels of magnesium may be prone to producing excess amounts of cholesterol. But that's, again, not the problem. The problem is when cholesterol exists in the gooey soup with sugar.
The combination.
That gets dangerous. Okay? And you don't have to be diabetic to have that soup in your arteries.
And should everybody be eating the same? Should some people be eating more? And how do you know? How do you know?
Well, the foundations, I think, are more or less the same for everybody. All right? But then, of course, through proper medical history, proper questioning,
so
and then
you do tailor.
Through doing some tests,
you
would
your
tailor
program.
it. Absolutely, absolutely. You tailor it to each person. Yeah.
So, one final word.
Yes.
Of advice.
Of advice. Okay. Get educated. Don't depend solely on the same sources that you've relied on to educate yourself until now.
And you have a website.
It's the information age.
You have a website that we've posted.
That's right.
Can people get more information about and continue this conversation by looking at your website?
Oh, absolutely. I've got some very good articles on my website. I have a blog on my website. Read these articles, and are
you available for people to get in touch with through your website?
My number is on the website, so I'm absolutely available for people to get in touch with on the website, yes.
Elie, I thank you. And I'm trying to store all this information and all the things that I believe were right that are really not right, and especially the cholesterol scare.
Yeah.
That is really information. So I thank you, and good luck, and we'll hear from you.
Thank you for having me.
Just recently, 20 Israeli, Arab, and Jewish teenagers have spent 2 weeks together at Camp Shomria, a camp just outside of Ottawa. They live together, they work together, and they listen to each other. It was called Heart to Heart, and we're going to meet the co-counselor, Isaac Cates Rose. You were in charge of the group, Isaac. Tell us about the experience. This was only the second time it's been done, right?
Right. This was the second year only that Heart to Heart has taken place at Camp Shomria, which, as you mentioned, is in Perth, Ontario, just about an hour outside of Ottawa. And obviously then it's a program in its infancy. It's a program still finding itself and its purpose, but I think immediately, and to anyone paying any attention, the need for the program is very high, and the purpose for the program is to create understanding where currently there is almost none to be found.
You bring together these teenagers, Israeli Arab, Israeli Jewish. They're coming from warring cultures. How do the parents agree to such a thing in the first place? And how are they prepared for the camp experience? Do they jump right into it? Do they have a program to meet each other before? How does it work?
Well, back in Israel, all the teenagers are from the same neck of the woods, approximately in Israel, the Shulash region, which means triangle. It's sort of a triangle above Jerusalem and towards Haifa. And though they're all from the same general area of Israel, they do not live in the same towns or cities.
They live in different worlds. They're in the same country.
Different worlds, kilometers apart from each other. So to prepare them for coming to camp and to get them ready for a huge culture shock in so many ways, not only just because of traveling thousands of kilometers to Canada, being surrounded by lakes and trees, which is very new for them, but being in such close proximity to that other culture that has always been alien and in their minds opposed to them. To prepare for that, their teachers work together through an organization in Israel called Givat Chaviva, which has been doing incredible work since the birth of the state in 1948, if not before then.
Incredible work in meeting, in
cross-cultural work, dialogue, and
cultural groups,
coexistence.
I remember a dance group with Arab and Israeli kids.
Dancing, cooking, any avenue they can find to promote contact and communication between peoples is something they'll explore.
So they
And
meet together before.
they meet together a handful of times with their teachers. So there's one on the trip. Two of their chaperones come, and they're their school teachers back home. One of them is an Arab man, Zachariah, who's wonderful, and one of them is a Jewish woman, Ruby, who's also incredible. And they bring the kids together a handful of times back in Israel to meet each other, to get to know each other a little bit. But within Israel, it's very difficult for there to be any meaningful connection beyond a handshake and an introduction. For that, they have to cross an ocean.
So this couldn't happen in Israel.
No, and I think we may not get to all of them, but we did some interviews with the kids, and a lot of them, even at the young age of 14, have the awareness to know that they needed to come to Canada for this experience, or they needed to get out of Israel, because within Israel it's very, very difficult to escape that omnipresent tension and expectations, because you're always aware, even though these kids live in secure parts of the country and they're all from fairly comfortable families and good socioeconomic levels, if they can afford to come here, none of them are doing so badly. But despite that, at the very essence of what they understand it means to be Israeli or to be Arab or to be Palestinian is this tension, is this fear of the other, is this hatred sometimes of the other.
But doesn't that carry on? It's embedded and part of their education with the Arab Israeli kids, in their textbooks, in their culture, in their day of Nakba, of tragedy, which we call the Day of Independence.
Right.
These are attitudes embedded, hostility and mistrust and
Very, very deeply so.
and fear.
And it's especially fear. And it's naive to think that as soon as they step off the plane in Ottawa International Airport,
It's love
everything's...
and kisses.
Of course that's not the case. And then if that's true, then why bother coming at all? Because in Canada, there's a safe space where they can look at each other as individuals, as equals, and in that safe space be empowered and be given the courage to confront those challenging fears, to confront those walls that keep them separated, and in their minds defend them from each other and from the hard truths that both sides hold, because both sides are right. Amos Oz once famously said that the conflict is a tragedy because it is a conflict between two rights, but it's so hard for anyone, any individual on either side, to hear the right, to hear the truth of the other. So that's why Canada provides a proper backdrop.
How are the parents approached about this?
The parents obviously are supportive of the idea, and because they help their kids do it, they pay for it, they obviously want this experience to be a part of their children's education. Which isn't to say, though, that they have the same ideas or that they are paragons of the education that we're trying to get across to them. They just understand, and it's impossible, I think, not to understand, that there is plenty wrong in Israel.
Do you have trouble convincing them? Do you have to convince them? Or they...
The convincing happens
volunteer?
on the Israeli side, so with the teachers and through Givat Chaviva, Hashemer Hatzayir's partner organization. Hashemer Hatzayir runs the camp in Eastern Ontario.
We're going to take a break, Isaac, and we'll be back, and we're going to hear from the kids themselves.
Fantastic.
You were the counselor, the co-counselor, in charge of the group of Israeli, Arab, and Jewish kids from Israel. When they came, it was your responsibility to ensure that the relationship grows, but still in honesty, that they should listen to each other. What was your experience with it?
Well, of course, and the most important thing for me to say, and it ended very recently, so I'm still unpacking it and deconstructing it and turning it around in my hands to learn more from the experience, but it was the most incredible and rewarding thing I've done as an educator, and I've been a Jewish educator for 6 years now, but not for, I think, the reasons that most people would jump to believe, that that a bunch of Arab and Jewish kids came over from across the world, halfway across the world, and hugged each other and danced in the fields.
Like that.
No, it wasn't like that. It was more in keeping with the things I believe in. It was hard work, and it was sweat, and it was tears occasionally. And because of that, that's why it was really a rewarding, fulfilling experience for me to help facilitate that process, because I believe that the sweat and the tears and the occasional anger and frustration, and then the more often moments of, wow, that's something I'd never thought about that way, were constructive. And I think it's very rare for there to be constructive education about the other and about oneself in Israel. I think normally it's set along a track that doesn't lead anywhere good usually.
We're going to hear from the kids themselves about what happened and how they felt about it. So let's have a look right now.
I think that's one of the highlights was when all the girls we made the hard conversation, and then when the conversation is over, we stayed together to just talk and we laughed together. It was so fun, all the girls. And the most hard moment was when I make a conversation with few people and I just can't, I don't know, it was so hard that I just can't to listen to what they said, and I actually really want to listen, but I couldn't, and it was the hardest, I think so.
More? We have more?
So, well, we can touch on that quickly if you like. This is
right.
Einav, and Einav was one of the Jewish girls on the trip. She's incredible and brilliant. And I'd love to talk about both aspects of what she said, the best part and the hardest part simultaneously. So the best part was, for her, a conversation that the girls in their cabin, all the girls, Jewish and Arab, slept in one cabin, all the boys, Jewish and Arab, slept in another. And this happened in both cabins, without the help of their counselors, without the help of any adults, sat themselves down and talked about spontaneously, without any instruction from us, early on in the trip, saying, listen, there's a separation here. The Jewish girls right now only hang out with the Jewish girls. The Arab girls only hang out with the Arab girls. For the boys, there was tension in the cabin because all 15-year-old boys like to horseplay, but when you introduce identity politics and identity conflict, it seemed to take on this whole new meaning, like, why won't he turn off the lights in the cabin? It's because I'm Jewish and I want to sleep, and the Arab boys will never turn off the lights. Why won't the Jewish boys be quiet when I'm trying to sleep? All these issues had come up instantly. The tension was there, and the tension manifests itself when the two groups are put into proximity with each other, even in young teenagers. And what was so incredible to me is that one morning, the boys ran up to me and the girls ran up to Amal, my co-counselor, and said, listen, Isaac, Amal, we sat down with each other last night, we sorted it out, and now everything's a lot better. We sat down and we talked about our issues and the things that were bothering us. You guys weren't even there, and now we have rules for the cabin. We are going to hang out with each other a lot more intentionally on purpose. And that's what Einav was alluding to was the best thing. And that was a huge, heartwarming moment for me.
We're going to hear from this boy now who's Arab. Is that correct?
This is Shaheen. Yep. He is 15 years old, and he's also had a lot to say, and we'll see what he has to say.
Okay.
Two sides, get us together and learn about each other, to know how they live and how us live. And Shumria, it's the best place to try to work.
So,
if you could tell one thing to kids your age back home, what would you want to tell them? What do you think it's important for them to?
I think that they have to come here to learn more, to know more about this thing, to try it. Sweet thing.
He says there has to be more of this sort of thing going on.
yeah, and you said that if he could tell one thing to kids back home, relay one bit of information, it's that they should also come here to learn more. They should come to Canada to learn more, or in one way or another, they should learn more Because in the first clip, as you talked about, it's about two sides, learning how the other lives and how we live, looking within ourselves and outside of ourselves, and learning how those two things can indeed be put together and how they must be put together.
But to start off with, what was it like? We have to take a break, but take us to the very beginning and tell us what it was like and what the atmosphere was like and how you felt. You must have been kind of scared yourself at this kind of responsibility.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be back in a minute.
היו לי כל מיני דעות קדומות שהערבים הם אנשים ממש בעייתיים ושאי אפשר להסתדר איתם. עכשיו זה שונה לגמרי.
What did he say?
That was Dekel talking about...
And he's an Arab-Israeli boy.
He's actually Jewish. He's
Oh.
from Moroccan and Yemeni background.
Oh.
And
So much for stereotypes.
Right? It's sometimes you just can't even tell, which is a very interesting lesson in and of itself. He was saying that he had had many thoughts that the Arabs were terrible, that it was impossible to deal with them. That was what he had heard and what he had learned before he came, and now it's completely different. It's absolutely different after the program. And now we'll hear Allah saying something similar.
All right, let's hear.
حسيت بأمان أكثر مع اليهود أكثر من كان بإسرائيل. عن جد يعني اكتشفت أشياء جديدة وأشياء حلوة أحلى فيهم. المخيم أعطانا فرصة إنه نحسن علاقاتنا معهم، إنه نحسن شخصيتنا برضو من جوا إحنا.
So it was much more than really transformative, much more than understanding the other. She said, I learned things about myself too.
Exactly, because...
That means it went very, very deep.
I hope so. That was what we were trying to do, because we think Amal and I, as the educators, and everyone we worked with, understood the roots of the problem to be very deep, and the roots of that misunderstanding and conflict to go much further than just the surface, and not being able to understand the other person because of language and culture. They go down to who we are. How we look at the other reflects on who we are. So that's what we were trying to get the teenagers to think about, which is a very tall order for a 15-year-old, especially when most 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and adults in Israel from both sides of the conflict can't do it themselves. But they amazed us. They amazed us every time with their ability.
Does it give you hope?
It does give me hope. And at the beginning, when there were more issues to struggle with, and there was a very palpable tension still, not tension that was violent in any way, but just, this is not normal. This is weird for us to be in the same room. When I saw that, I understood just how difficult it is to grow up in Israel and to understand that no matter where you are, there's always a person down the street, your neighbor, who you're not supposed to get, you're not supposed to understand or be friends with because of something that always exists between you, that is their fault, that isn't your fault, etc., etc. And that was disheartening for me as someone who loves Israel and cares about it very deeply. But by the end of it, I was filled with a lot of hope, and it's the way I always feel when I'm with young people, when I'm with young teenagers and children, that they have such incredible potential to change the status quo and to improve it. And that with just a little guidance and a little bit of a remove from that pressure cooker of Israel, these 20 teenagers all had an experience that I don't think they'll ever forget, and I think that will inform their decisions and their attitudes for themselves and for their children, hopefully, for the rest of their lives.
This was the second year of this program called Heart to Heart. Has there been a follow-up if the changes persisted, and did it have a ripple effect from the group that went last year?
Well, obviously, my kids went back on Sunday. The 20 of them flew back on Sunday, and a year ago at the end of the trip, they go to Pearson. They end the trip with a few days in Toronto after the camp and see the CN Tower and enjoy the sights, and then they fly back home. So I wasn't there to follow up on their process as a group and if they're staying in touch, but I know, and this was always would bring a smile to my face, when I would see them on Facebook posting on each other's walls making jokes to each other, sending funny YouTube videos
They
or whatever
stayed
it
in
is.
touch.
The 20 kids, all of them stay in touch with each other after the trip because they've shared this experience that isn't just a sightseeing, touristy, fun vacation in Canada, but it's something much deeper that involved more struggle. And whenever you go through something like that with someone, no matter who they are, you have a bond and something that connects you, and hopefully a bond that survives the antagonism towards unity that exists in Israel. So I know those kids stayed in touch and continued to meet with each other, and I know for a fact that my kids are going to have a bunch of meetings when they get back to Israel, not only because that's a part of the program organized by their teachers, and this has made me very happy. In our last activity, we talked about how they would continue the work they started here, but they said, yeah, why wouldn't we continue to hang out with each other? Every month we're gonna go see a movie in Tel Aviv, or we'll go visit one of the girls in El-Fachim, an Arab village, and hang out with her family, or we'll go to Kibbutz Ein Shemer, where one of the Jewish boys lived. They all want to continue, and they don't understand why not. And to have that new stubbornness, of course we're going to be friends, is, I think, a very important tool in the fight to make Israel a more peaceful place.
You're going to Israel in September for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be in touch with the group?
They've insisted on it. They would not have it any other way. They made me promise that I would come visit, and I think they will have my head if I don't, but it's been my intention ever since I took the job in early spring, knowing that I would be spending a year in university in Jerusalem next year, to try and keep in touch, follow up with them while I was there as an educator of theirs and as a friend of all of theirs, to try and sustain this process in the face of the pressure that they're returning to in Israel.
Too bad we can't bring their parents to camp.
Too bad we can't bring Bibi Netanyahu and Abu Mazen and Abbas to camp, because
too bad.
I think that was maybe the idea between Camp David, which obviously did not have the same effect, but maybe it would have succeeded if there were more teenagers around.
You said that programs like Heart to Heart are the seed of the resolution of the conflict.
During the reception dinner, which was held at the Bloor Spadina JCC, the Miles and Dell JCC.
You said that, and you believe that.
I do believe that. I remember I quoted a paper I read for one of my classes this year by one of my professors, saying that the reason the conflict persists is that the two people haven't reconciled themselves to the existence of the other. They still try and deny that the other exists, or that the other has to exist and will continue to exist in the same place. And I followed up that idea by saying I truly believe, and I still do, and I'll continue to, that
Maybe
Heart to
Heart
is
a tiny
seed,
a tiny first step
of that reconciliation and of that resolution.
I thank you, Isaac.
Thank you so much for having me, Doris.
My name is Shaheen. I'm 15 years old. I'm from Wadi Ara, Ain Sahla, Israel.
Did you think before the trip that it was important to come?
Not really. But after I come here, I think it's important.
באתי למקום שאני לא הגיעה לפה, ונתנו לי את ההזדמנות הזאת ואת החוויה הזאת כדי להגיע למקום עם אנשים חדשים, עם קבוצה אחרת.
I think that one of the highlights was when all the girls we made the hard conversation, and then when the conversation is over, we stayed together to just talk and we laughed together. It was so fun.
حسيت بأمان أكثر مع اليهود أكثر من كان بإسرائيل. عن جد يعني اكتشفت أشياء جديدة وأشياء حلوة أحلى فيهم. المخيم أعطانا فرصة إنه نحسن علاقاتنا معهم، إنه نحسن شخصياتنا برضو من جوا إحنا.
קודם כל, אני חושבת אולי זה אפילו סוג של ניסוי, לראות מה קורה, באמת לראות אם אפשר דו-קיום במדינת ישראל. המטרה של זה בעצם להראות שכן אפשר, ואני חושב שזה כן אומר שזה כן מראה שאפשר לעשות דו-קיום במדינת ישראל.